Chapter 14. Now we get an excerpt from Dr. Graham's collected notes. Below the thunders of the upper deep, far beneath the abysmal sea, his ancient, dreamless, unevaded sleep, the kraken sleepeth. Faintest sunlights flee about his shadowy sides, above him swell huge sponges of millennial growth and height, and far away into the sickly light, from many a wondrous grot and secret cell, unnumbered, an enormous polyp, winnow with giant arms, the slumbering green. There hath he lain for ages, and will lie, battering upon huge sea worms in his sleep, until the latter fire shall heat the deep. Then once by man and angels to be seen, in roaring he shall rise, and on the surface die. And that is from The Kraken by Alfred Lord Tennyson. On monitor after monitor, the same thing was playing out. The monsters were all coming out to play, and people were dying, most in fear and panic, some fighting bravely, all outmatched by the return of the sleeping gods to the world. One by one, the monitors went to static. "I thought we were going to release them gradually," Jonah said, "one at a time." He sounded as stunned as she felt. "I'm not the one doing this," she said. Only one monitor still displayed an image, Monster Zero, on his throne of fire, all three heads shrieking in unison. The bunker shook, lights flickered. "I'm no longer in control," she realized. It was Monster Zero. He was doing all this. This has gotten away from me. Jonah got it too. He studied the screen. "Long live the king," he said. She thought she heard triumph filtered through his accustomed sarcasm. Then he left. Something moved in the corner of Emma's vision. She turned, and to her horror saw Madison. Had she been standing behind them, watching everything? "Maddie," she said. "You're a monster," her daughter told her. Then she sprinted off, and Emma was alone. Brooks woke up to a fair, coolish morning in the highlands of Yunnan. He took a Humvee, a science team, and a squadron of soldiers down to the old facility. The bodies had been removed, but the rusty bloodstains still covered the floor. The text confirmed what he'd already guessed, that the security and contaminant systems had been sabotaged, almost certainly with Emma's help. He hoped to find some other clues. One team had already been through the data, but he thought he might notice something they hadn't. He'd only been there a couple of hours when he got the call from Hess, a Monarch communications officer. "Brooks here," he said. "Dr. Brooks, things are developing. You should probably get back up here." Ling stood before the waterfall, staring through it at Mothra's cocooned form, feeling her. She hadn't told Brooks everything she knew. She felt a little bad about that, but she still wasn't sure of all the facts herself. Only what her mother and aunt told her, and her grandmother, the stories collected not from indigenous people or ancient sources, but those passed down from mother to daughter. We are connected to her. She'd been taught, connected for numberless generations. She had wondered if it was true, of course, how much of her materline's mythology was real, and how much fantasy, created by time and imperfect transmission. Myths were like a game of telephone, becoming less like the original every time a different teller learned it. But Mothra was real. She had learnt that at a very young age, and not by telling. Firsthand, it was so long ago, so strange, that at times in her adult life she wondered if she had dreamed it, if it was some sort of false memory, but the connection was tangible. She'd felt it then, and she felt it now, growing stronger. In the last few hours, something had changed. Mothra had shivered, as if she felt a jolt of some sort. Her transformation had quickened in response, and she had a sense of apprehension and need. The clouds had been gathering above, and now a harsh, cold rain began to fall. Ling continued to stand in it, ignoring the chill, listening to Mothra hurry towards her second berth. When Brooks got back outside, piles of thunderheads were rolling in, and high winds bent the tops of the council trees. Rain came across the mountains like a solid wall. They had to slow to a crawl because visibility dropped so low. He wasn't driving, so he stayed on the crackly radio as Hess updated him. There was another Titan unleashed, Rodan, and now all hell was breaking loose. They had lost contact with Monarch, and all communications were getting sketchy. The road was close to being a river by the time he got back to camp. He pushed into the command tent. Inside, all was in bedlam. He made his way through the chaos to Hess, who was on the radio. "Castle Bravo, this is Containment Team Mossera. Do you read? Over." He didn't look hopeful. "Anything?" Brooks said. "No, sir. We've lost contact with the Argo, Castle Bravo, and the other containment sites." "Which ones?" Brooks asked. "All of them," he replied. "Angok, what? Skull Island, Stone Mountain, all the Titans. They're escaping." He played back the last transmissions they had received from the other containment bases. Behemoth shattering buildings in Rio de Janeiro with his tusks, Methuselah cutting a swath through Munich, Scylla stalking through Phoenix on her spidery legs. "Jesus," he murmured. One monitor was still showing something live. Monster Zero, the three-headed dragon, atop a volcano, roaring, and it clicked. It's him, Brooks realized. He's the one doing this. They're responding to his call. The power flickered and then faded. "Where's Dr. Ling?" he demanded. But he knew she was almost always with Mothra. He ran back outside and found her there in the rain, standing with her back to him. "Dr. Ling!" he shouted, trying to cut through the howling wind and driving rain. "We've lost contact with Monarch." She didn't turn around. "Dr. Ling!" The rain slackened and the wind died down. Above, the thick clouds parted and fireflies began to flicker in the highland jungle. And beyond the waterfall, something new was happening. The cocoon was rippling, glowing. Tears appeared in the fabric, and sharp, insectile legs pushed out. Whatever Mothra had been, she was different now. He was about to see how different. It was a little terrifying, but mostly exciting. The other monsters were free. Now it was Mothra's turn. He hoped Ling was right about Mothra. If Monster Zero was controlling her too, he and his team were as good as dead. But it didn't feel like that was happening. She began to sing, like the night music of insects, and bigger, more meaningful. A gentle blue light began to shine as her gossamer wings unfolded. She was beautiful as she took flight. Ling followed the Titan's path into the sky too. She looked a little otherworldly in the blue light. Her expression was nothing short of reverential. He remembered the Iwi people of Skull Island, their attitude towards Kong. He thought he saw something of that in Ling's hazel eyes. Maddie ran through the corridors of the bunker towards her room, trying to process what she had seen, the sheer amount of destruction that was occurring, the death. Mother had said the monsters and humans could live in harmony. Her experience with Mother had made Emma think she was right, and there were other examples, Godzilla and Kong. But from what she had seen, the only relationship these Titans wanted with humans was that of predator to prey, and Monster Zero, she would never shake off the sheer malevolence she'd seen in those eyes. There was no peaceful coexistence with that guy. No wonder Jonah had sneered that notion. "Madison, wait!" Mum, following her. She would want to talk. to argue somehow it all made sense, but it didn't, and she was in no mood for waiting or talking. "Get away from me," she shot back. But her mother persisted. "Look," she said, "I know things haven't gone exactly according to plan, but I can fix it." "According to plan?" Madison said. "You said that we were going to be careful, that you'd release them one at a time, that you would restore balance." "And we are," she insisted. "You also failed to mention the man we teamed up with was a homicidal maniac. They were going to take over Monarch and kill the Titans. Jonah was the only one who could pull this off. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," she said. "You know who taught me that. Dad." Her mother blinked. Her mouth opened a little, but she didn't say anything. "You said he left us, that he was a drunk who didn't care about us." "Because he did leave us," her mother said. "Somebody had to be strong for you, and it sure as hell wasn't him. He gave up on me, gave up on you." "No," Maddie shouted. "You're the one who gave up. You gave up on everything. You gave up on humanity." "Madison, and if Dad's such an asshole, then why'd he come back? Why is he trying to help people while we're trying to kill them?" "We are helping people, baby." "Bullshit," she said, taking a step towards her mother. "You said you were doing this for Andrew, but do you really think he would have wanted this?" That made an impression on her. I don't know," she said. "Exactly, and I'm starting to think you don't know more than you do." She ran into a room, slamming the door, and locked it, then ignoring her mother, pounding on it, and calling her name until she went away. She cast about her room, unsure of what to do next. She really wanted to break something, but there wasn't a lot to break. Her pad maybe, or some of the old stuff in the room, but no, the whole world was breaking. She didn't want to contribute any more to that. She had gone along with Mum on this whole thing. She could have stopped all of it at any time, just by telling someone. Dr. Manichi, Chen, Vivani, her dad, but she hadn't. She had believed. She was responsible for what was happening because she had trusted her mother. She had to do something. The bunker had been built for a lot more people than were currently in it, so Maddie had plenty of rooms to choose from, but Mum wanted her reasonably near the command center, which limited her choices. Maddie had picked an old radio room. Mum said this was one of the first Monarch bunkers to be built, way back in the 40s, and it showed. Her room was like a time capsule. She liked the old-fashioned equipment, the poster warning that her loose lips would sink ships. It was like something out of a black-and-white movie. Her gaze swung back to the poster, "Loose lips sink ships." She didn't have access to the internet here. Jonah had made certain of that. She didn't have a phone. But what if this stuff still worked? The radio, for instance. The control room had high-tech stuff. Probably no one had used this equipment in decades. If it did work, maybe she could do something. Maybe she could sink a ship. She examined the gray metal console, found a switch clearly labeled on and off. She switched it on. Static and voices immediately filled the room. She jerked back a little, not sure what she was hearing. Then she recognized the voices. Jonah's men. So that was the intercom. Good to know. But not what she was looking for. She flipped it off, and after a little more searching, found another switch. This time, dials lit up. Little red needles swung to their positions, and an angry buzz began. She leaned towards the microphone and put her finger on the black button on the base. The buzz stopped. She found a knob and began turning it. The sound changed. Bits of what might be voices went in and out of the static. She put her mouth close to the microphone and pushed the button again. "Hello?" she said, experimentally. Nothing. She kept turning the knob, trying to find a clear channel. Is anyone there? I'm trying to reach Monarch. She turned it a little more, and suddenly voices poured from the speakers. People screaming. People pleading for help. Mayday! Mayday! We need help! Everything is burning! Please, is anyone there? Horrified, she backed away, got on her bed, and covered her ears. It went on, and there was nothing she could do. Nothing. She felt like she was dissolving inside. Mark was exhausted. He'd spent hours pulling apart animal sounds, analyzing them, playing them side by side with the recordings of the orca in action. He wasn't sure anymore that there was a point to it, but it gave him something to do rather than think about the fact that his ex-wife was now mass murdering on a global scale. He hoped at least that she was right when she said Madison was safe. It seemed to him that even Monarch bunkers might not be secure from what was happening now. Other than his animal sounds, the bridge was mostly quiet, just a few crew and Chen working at something as fervently as he was. Any luck? Chen asked after a while. No, he said. Whatever Emma used to create the orca signal, I've never heard it. He looked over at Chen's console, and what appeared to be ancient texts, murals, and inscriptions. How are you doing? Schwenba shui wimbende zina sen, she said. How's that? He said. Myth is our compass. It's something my mum used to say. She believed our stories about monsters and dragons could help us find the titans and restore our connection to nature. Your mother, he said. Wait, you're a second-generation monarch? Third, she corrected. It runs in the family. Smiling, she showed Mark a photo of her family, including her, and what must be her twin sister, and her own identical twin girls, who looked to be about 3. It was more than a little weird. That's incredible, Mark said. Don't suppose your family has any tips on slaying dragons? Slaying dragons is a Western concept, she answered. In the East, they are sacred, divine creatures that brought wisdom and strength, even redemption. Mark turned that over in his mind. Was that where Serizawa was coming from? Ultimately, the idea that these monsters were divine, gods. From what he remembered of mythology, divine didn't necessarily mean good or even nice. The gods could be angry, jealous, petty, spiteful. But something about the way Chen explained it touched a chord in him. Redemption. He could use some of that. Quiet time was over. The rest of the team was returning to the bridge. I don't get it, Colonel Foster said. This oxygen destroyer, why wasn't Monster Zero affected? I mean, I'm no scientist, Barnes said, but maybe it's got something to do with his goddamn head growing back. I've never seen anything like this, Stanton said. It violates everything we know about the natural order. Unless he's not part of the natural order, Chen said. All eyes turned on her. What do you mean? Serizawa asked. Chen went to her station. I was able to piece this together, she said. She brought up a cave painting depicting a 3-headed dragon surrounded by flames and skulls. Well, he looks vaguely familiar, Coleman said. It tells of the great dragon who fell from the stars, a hydra whose storm swallowed both man and god alike. Muck got what she was saying, but really, you mean an alien, he said? Yes, he's not part of our natural order, and he's not meant to be here. A false king, Serizawa said. Mark's attention was on another glyph. This one showed Godzilla fighting the 3-headed dragon, but the big lizard wasn't alone. He had help from above in the form of some sort of winged monster, and below humans were fighting with him, tiny though they were. An invasive species, Stanton said. If he's an alien, it could explain the storms and the effect he's having on the other Titans. Almost as if he's reshaping the planet to his own liking. These legends, Serizawa asked, what did they call him? Ghidorah, she said, the one who has many. What is what? Mark asked. Ghidorah? I think she said gonorrhea, Coleman whispered. At the controls, Griffin interrupted. Dr. Serizawa, she said, we're approaching Castle Bravo, but there's something you should see. Outside it was pouring with rain, but they could still see what she was talking about. The island and oil rig that had hid the underwater base was surrounded by military vessels and helicopters. A lot of them.